Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new edition of the Patriots Catch-22 podcast, video edition, live from Las Vegas after day 2 of the Shrine Bowl. And I don't usually get too nostalgic with you, Alex Barth alongside with me here, but we started our podcast with 2 webcams in our home offices, and now we're out here shooting on location with this great video set up. Allegiant Stadium is somewhere back there in the background, through the bushes there as well, and doing this on the road together. It's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool, and obviously the Patriots video team is making it possible, so huge shout out to them for getting this all set up and making it work. But this is coming from how we started it, really starting back in 2018, lugging all that gear around, covering the Patriots back in the day. This has been a cool experience.
This is how it started versus how it's going.
Exactly. We're going to have to pull some screenshots.
And that's Chris Gogolos behind the camera. He's the one that set this all up for us, so we really appreciate it. We have 14 different names on this lovely list that we put together of prospects that stood out today in fully padded practice out at the Shrine Bowl
football
at UNLV. Real football, tons of NFL scouts and general managers, decision makers, if you will. Patriots coaching staff, I thought actually hung on a little bit later this time around to check out East practice as well. So they were definitely getting a good look at the prospects. Just really quickly off the top, some
well, I'll just one more thing about the coaching thing too. Troy Brown spoke after practice. He kind of talked about how they have a good relationship with the East team, and they've kind of talked about each other's players. So that was a big question of mine coming into the week. How much are the Patriots going to get to watch the guys on the East team?
Sure.
They're watching. Yeah. They're definitely watching.
Yeah, they are definitely watching. And really quickly, just some bookkeeping things. Steve Belichick was back with the team today. Didn't really actively coach in the practice. He's in that supervisory role. So a little bit more hands-off than some of the other coaches in that role, like Bill Belichick. It was once again right in the thick of things. Getting up with Brenton Cox, I saw him working on pass rushing moves with him, and always special teams, of course, with Bill. You know, pulling guys off the field on special teams. And we did also see Zay Flowers for the first time out here in Vegas in pads and participating in West practice. He told me after practice that it was one and done for him. And I think that all he needed to do out there today was show scouts that his speed, that all the skills that we see on film with him definitely translate in person. And I think that's all anybody was really looking for him to do. And we saw that in full swing today. I thought he lived up to expectation, lived up to the billing. And I came away from the practice really thinking that Zay, who thinks he's going to run in the low 4.3s, he thinks 4.3 flat. He's trying to go for a really great time in the 40-yard dash at the combine. If he hits that number, I think we're going to have to start talking about him as a late first-round prospect. And there's some precedent for that. You know, a guy like Hollywood Brown, I think, went 25th or something like that, right in that range, that has that speed type of skill set, not somebody that's this bigger specimen of a receiver on the outside. We can talk a little bit more detail about what he did, but in general, what did you think about Zay?
Yeah, I was really impressed. I mean, he just moves differently. We watched him go through the gauntlet drill, and he's just gliding across the field, in and out of his cuts effortlessly. We talk about this a lot on the shows, fast versus quick. And I'm not saying he's not fast. We didn't really get to see his straight line speed today, but the quickness, he's going to be up there with anybody in the draft. I mean, Jordan Addison is probably the most quick receiver in this draft. He's going to be right there with Jordan Addison when we talk about that. Worked mostly out of the slot, which I thought was interesting.
Right.
That's probably what he's going to need to do at the NFL level. So the Patriots giving him a chance to showcase those skills. And the other interesting thing was they had him returning punts a lot. The second punt period, he was, I think it was pretty much only him. Maybe there were one or two punts. It was somebody else. But that's something that he definitely projects as a guy, you know, that he can do at the next level, and the Patriots put him out there to do it.
Yeah, I talked to him after practice briefly, and he mentioned that he was a little bit disappointed with the punts themselves because he didn't have any in the middle of the field that he could really show off some of his return skills.
He had an impressive one where, and we'll talk about Michael Turk, but he had to track the ball like 35 yards, and he was able to get to it.
Because we all know he can run, and we all know he can create with the ball in his hands. So I was more looking to see how comfortable he was fielding punts, because he's only done it 7 times in college college at BC. He only has 7 career punt returns because he was playing 75 snaps a game on offense. They didn't really use him too much in the return game. In the NFL, I think that he's definitely going to be involved in the return game. Maybe not if he gets drafted by the Patriots because they obviously have Marcus Jones.
They have a guy who's pretty good at it too,
but
yeah.
maybe there. He was playing mostly in the slot, as you mentioned, that F role for the Patriots. He said he's been working a little bit at the X in New England's offense as well. But I think they wanted to get a real good look at him in the slot. And there was one route in particular where he ran an option route over the middle of the field, and it seemed like he read it out correctly, and the coaches gave him a little bit of a dap up at the end there to say, hey, yeah, that's what we're looking for you to do. And I think that was what really stood out was they were looking at him in that inside number 2, number 3 spot, trying to see if he can run the option route tree that we've seen for years with the Patriots, whether it's Julian Edelman or Wes Welker inside there. A guy that I think, though, from a New England perspective, and I know a lot of people have the Antonio Brown comp with him as well, just from a playing style perspective, obviously, but I think that there's maybe a little bit of Deion Branch in his game as well. I think that maybe they see that. And I wonder if Troy sees a little bit of himself in a guy like Zay Flowers, where he has that ability to do some different things in the inside of the formation. But again, really lived up to the billing out there today. I totally understand why he wouldn't suit it back up again after what he was able to do. We'll see you at the combine for a guy like Zay Flowers. But last on Zay, and then we want to talk about a bunch of other guys, as I mentioned. If you're the Patriots, and now we're in the conversation, and look, 14's too high for a guy like Zay Flowers, I personally think.
I just feel like in this draft specifically, if that's the kind of player you're looking for, I still like Addison better.
Yeah.
And Addison's
he's a little bigger.
Right, and he's going to be there at 14. So if that's the guy they want to take, here we go with the tiers, right?
Yeah.
Addison's probably going to be there at 14.
Right.
There's not, right, if you're drafting that guy that high, then that's your guy.
So the tough thing about it then is from a New England perspective, because I know a lot of people are going to watch this, they're going to hear the hype coming out of Vegas about Zay Flowers, and they're going to want him. But we're really talking about potentially trading down in the first round to really get into a position to be in that perfectly, I think somewhere in the 20s is more realistic for him. And now we're getting a little bit tricky with trade downs and things like that. I don't necessarily know if the Patriots are in that school of thought right now where they're trading down to take a slot receiver, which is really what he is.
Especially when, and we've talked about this a lot, this is a really good draft for that kind of player going further down, guys like Tank Dell.
I mean, there's a couple guys
we're going to talk about. So, it's not a draft where you need to reach to get that guy if you feel like that's the guy you need. And we do think that a guy like that, especially with Jacoby Myers, a pending free agent, Bill O'Brien coming in, like a guy like that does project as a need, but they're going to have other opportunities to add that guy where they don't need to overexert themselves, give up all these assets to move around elsewhere when there are other needs like tackle and corner that might be more pressing.
Absolutely. All right, so let's segue now into a player on the defense side of the ball. I think Zay Flowers is sort of a star of the day just because of the hype and just because of the type of player and prospect that he is. But the real star of the day was probably A.J. Finley from Ole Miss, who we talked a little bit about yesterday. Had 3 interceptions in East practice. Now, one of them was a tip ball. The last one was a tip ball. But the first 2 were great reads, especially that second one along the sideline where he really jumped the corner route and
ran the route better than the receiver did.
It was a beautiful play, safety play. He's somebody that the East team, the Falcons coaching staff, is clearly working more on the back end, whether it's deep safety in the center field role or split safety and cover 2 or quarters. That's sort of where I think they believe he's going to play in the NFL. And as much as we all want to see Devin McCourty back for, I think it would be his 14th or 15th season with the Patriots, they have to start thinking about the heir apparent to Devin McCourty, regardless of whether or not he comes back, because you got to start preparing for that exit or his retirement. And just reading some tea leaves from Devin so far this offseason, it certainly feels like he's definitely strongly considering retiring. And Finley was a guy that really looked good out there both days, but today in particular, getting those 3 picks.
Yeah, and even if McCourty comes back, I think it's the year too early versus the year too late thing. How great would it be if the guy that eventually assumes that role gets to learn under Devin McCourty for a year, right? So
absolutely.
Like Kyle Duggar and Patrick Chung would be a perfect example. And Duggar's talked about how important Patrick Chung was to him as a rookie. He wears his jersey number now, right?
Yeah.
So getting a guy like that, I think is big in this draft. And there aren't that many true free safeties in college football right now.
No.
It's a lot of guys that play a lot of different positions.
You can thank Vic Fangio for that, the new Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator. We can get to that in a second.
Finley has experience playing on that back end, and you're seeing it. Like, he looks natural back there. So that's kind of been a thing this week, and we'll talk about some other guys in the same regard. if I see a guy playing free, especially if it's on the Patriots side, but either team, if I see a guy playing free and he looks comfortable in that spot, instantly he's on my radar because that's not an easy trait to find.
Yeah, so Vic Fangio, for people that don't know, he just was hired by the Dolphins to be their defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And Fangio has brought in a too high safety shell to the NFL. This has been all over college football for years now because of the way that passing games go up and down the field in college. But now a lot of teams are playing this Fangio match quarters type of defense. So there's a lot of split safety. I mean, that's just what it is. And in college, that is what we see all the time. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'm watching film and all I see is quarters out of the defense. Right. I mean, they just run a ton of zone and they run a ton of quarters. Every once in a while, they'll throw in a cover 2 or they'll mix it up and they'll have a post safety structure rotation, that type of thing. But so much of the defense in college is quarters. So when you see a guy like Finley who can play deep and can play that center field role, it stands out. And I thought yesterday during individuals, his movement from that spot really stood out, just the way that he could flip his hips and how comfortable he looked in the backpedaling and then turning left or turning right to go find the football. And then today we finally saw it in a team setting when he was actually making plays on the ball in 7s and 11-on-11. So it translated really nicely for him. The last defensive back, and then we're going to go to the front 7.
We had a couple of, all right, you trimmed it down.
There's 14 of them.
Okay.
We got a lot.
Okay.
But I want to mention a couple of guys that we kind of felt stood out kind of as stars of the day, if you will.
Yeah.
I hope I'm saying his first name correctly. Cattrall Clark from Louisville.
Yeah.
Not a player that was really on my radar before we got to Vegas, but somebody that has really proven the last couple of days that he can really hang, and specifically going up against A.T. Perry today, the Wake Forest wide receiver we talked about at length in our first show. And this was a guy that I thought had that type of strappy and scrappy type of man coverage skill that was really getting in a guy like A.T. Perry's face, who's not a small dude, right? That's a 6'3" receiver, outside guy, and he was really able to cover him pretty well. The guy that when I was watching him, I thought his body type looked a little bit like Jack Jones, not Marcus, Jack Jones, right? So 5'10", 5'11", 195, still a little bit of that leaner build, but somebody that I think has got a little bit of length to him.
He plays much bigger, right? And there was another, so you mentioned the rep against A.T. Perry, which was a physical rep that he came out and won against the bigger receiver. There's another one where they ran a screen. I don't remember who caught it, but Antoine Green was a receiver from UNC who was the blocker, and he was assigned to set the block on that play, and Clark just rolled right through it.
Yeah.
Didn't have any problem, reached around the block, grabbed the ball carrier by the jersey. Like, this dude's playing physically on the boundary. We know the Patriots love that. The Jack Jones comp, for what we saw, makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a big week for the Cards, man. You know, Yasir Abdul, an outside linebacker from Louisville, he's popped a couple times. These guys are playing all jacked up. They're playing with the motor. But Clark certainly stood out today.
Okay, so we got a lot more names here to get to. So we're going to go a little bit more rapid fire with this group because we wanted to get to some of the bigger standouts of practice. We talked to some people after practice, and one guy that was mentioned to us was Tyrese Wheat from Mississippi State, who's on the West team with the Patriots, and is one of those hybrid edge guys, right? A stand-up outside linebacker in a 3-4, maybe a hand in the dirt defensive end and more even front type of looks. A typical Patriots tweener.
Yeah.
And he can really set the edge of the defense. I think that's what they've liked about him so far. And as much as I think the Patriots are set there for 2023 with Judon and Uche and Jennings coming back, you start to look, again, it's the year too early thing.
Right.
And a guy like Josh Uche, if he has another double-digit sack season, might start to price himself out of New England a little bit. You also talk about a guy like Jennings being a free agent as well. And, Matthew Judon is getting up there in age and is going to push 30 and push the end of that contract that they gave him a couple of years ago, not before long. So we both talked about it when we discovered Wheat here this week, and we said, it's a big possibility that they could take a mid-round, late, day 3 type of edge guy just to have another guy in the pipeline in case they don't re-sign those guys next offseason.
And I always kind of wondered, Mississippi State's really good at producing those sorts of players. And I've always wondered why the Patriots haven't dipped into that, because the one thing that they do, they don't rotate their defensive front a ton. So you need to be good against the run and the pass to play in that defensive system. And so here's Tyrese Wheat, and if he's a guy, we saw him setting the edge today, we saw him getting after the passer a little bit. Yeah, I can totally see why he'd be a guy that they'd have an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see that system that they run. I think one of the great things about this week for us as people that try to evaluate these things from a media perspective is that we're able to see them in the Patriots system.
Exactly.
And granted, it's base stuff, right? But even after practice, Jake Bobo, the receiver from UCLA, was talking about how complex the stuff that they are installing, what these players are. And he said,
they're here to win.
A lot of those guys are staying up late studying, trying to get a feel for what they're trying to run. And so I think some of these defensive players like Wheat, I think they're trying to get a good look in that sort of hybrid Kyle Van Noy, Hightower. I mean, how many guys have played on and off the ball for the Patriots over the years, or inside and outside, or things like that? All right, the other name that was mentioned to us was Trey Dean from Florida, the safety. I think unlike a guy like Finley, Dean feels more to me like a guy that's going to play closer to the line of scrimmage, most likely. But again, another position that the Patriots just love to keep stocked. And Jabril Peppers is a free agent. Adrian Phillips is starting to get up there in age a little bit. We know they have Kyle Duggar. I still like Josh Bledsoe. Like, I still think that he has a role on this team potentially. But Trey Dean's another player that I think could potentially be a Patriot fit.
I mean, you look at Dean just physically, 6'3", I think 6'3", 6'4", 207. He's a big, imposing guy, but he's played all over the place on Florida's defense. They had him at free. They had him in the box. He played a good amount of slot corner last year.
Yeah.
I talked to him earlier this week, and he told me he loves the big matchup. Going into the game, the coach would say, all right, you're going to be covering a wide receiver.
Yeah.
You're going to be covering a tight end. You're going to be covering a running back. He feels like he can hang with any of those positions, and he feeds on kind of during the week, watching the film on that guy, learning the matchup and getting into it. That sounds like a guy who's meant for New England. And again, they may be as down goes something.
Yeah.
As,
okay, it's a little windy out here.
Little you see there. They need the free, like we talk about them maybe needing a free safety, but there aren't that many true free safeties left in the game. So if it is a position they're maybe going to go about by committee, Trey Dean is a great guy to have in that committee because he can play it, but he can also do so many other things when you maybe need him elsewhere.
It's been a minute since they've drafted somebody from UF. They used to like the program a lot, and they used to go there a ton. Now, they don't do that as much, but one of the things that I always have heard, we've heard about why they've targeted UF DBs in the past is because they play a multiple scheme in the secondary, where they move guys around and guys have to play different spots, and guys are also playing with a lot of talented players at a place like UF. You know, Florida last year, he's playing with Keir Elam, right? He was a first-round pick for the Bills. So they have a bunch of different people and a bunch of different places and things like that, which I think is attractive for the Patriots always. All right, a couple more DBs, and then we'll move elsewhere on the depth chart here. What are they eating in Minnesota? Like, what are they feeding these
Minnesota
kids
guys,
in Minnesota? These kids came to play this week, both of them, Terrell Smith and Jordan Howden, who we talked about a little bit yesterday. But Smith, I thought, had a better day today, but Howden didn't have a bad day, and he had a good day yesterday. These Gophers came to play.
Howden, I'll talk about Howden specifically because the reason he came on my radar, I sort of just said it when we were talking about Dean.
Yeah.
If and both these guys on the Patriots roster, if the Patriots are putting a kid at free, I'm looking.
Yeah.
Because they need that position, and that's in the Patriots defense, the coaching staff, even in a situation like this, there's a ton of trust from the coaching staff playing free safety in this defense. So Howden's been back there. He's looked instinctive. You know, something I look at is, because he's watching the whole field in front of him, right? When the decision's made, whether it's a handoff, whether it's a throw, how quick is he turning his momentum right and heading towards it? And this is like Javarius Owens from Houston, who's on the East team, is a guy that I think has been really good about this week. I watch Howden. He's another guy that once that decision's made up front, once they declare, his foot's in the ground and he's off and he's flying to the football. And that's something that Devin McCourty, that's one of his best strengths. There's very little time between that decision and boom, he's right there, especially in his prime. I thought you saw some of that with Howden.
Smith was another one of those guys that was just really physical at the point of attack.
He played some corner too.
Yeah, he played some outside corner. He played some safety. But every single time he was thrown at or involved in the play, he was hitting somebody and really battling at the catch point, which you like to see. What I like a lot about, what we've learned, because this is my first time at a thing like this. I've watched it on TV like everybody else.
It's different.
But you have to, the intensity that certain guys play with. Like, certain guys are here to make some money, and I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but certain guys here are really here to compete, improve their draft stock. And I thought both Minnesota DBs are doing that this week.
Row the boat,
with
baby.
some of that intensity. And the other thing that I noticed about Howden is that the Patriots, I think, will take notice of some of the coverage rotations that they were doing in the back end, single high to split safety, things like that the Patriots do all the time. And I thought it was really funny as we kind of segue into some of the front players. The Patriots are working these guys on 2- and 3-man games, like stunts up front on the defensive line in an all-star game. Like that's how you know. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Mike Pellegrino dials up a 0 blitz on Thursday night, right? Like this is definitely a team, and they were off to the side when I noticed this, that they were running some of the Patriots pick or game type of drills that they do out at training camp all the time when we're out there. And it was 7-on-7 on one field, I think, or special teams or something else was going on the main field. And on the side field, they had the defensive linemen repping stunts. And I'm just thinking to myself, in an all-star game, like this is kind of crazy. Now, some of the guys that stood out, we mentioned Weed already. I thought that the Nebraska kid, who I'm blanking on the kid's name right now, Ochawan Mathis, I think is
Ochawan Mathis.
Ochawan Mathis. He played on East though, I believe. But he was really disruptive. That whole East front really ate up the offensive line. And I thought both defensive fronts in practice today, our first exposure to fully padded practices, so we could really take a look at the trenches. I thought the offensive lines had some issues with these defensive linemen, which tells you that there's some talent here on the defensive line.
I'll give you a guy from the West team, Habakkuk Baldonado, goes by Abba.
That guy's
from Pittsburgh.
huge. Yeah.
Big guy, long arms, just a disciplined player on the edge. So in 2021, he had a great season pass rush with 9.5 sacks, led the team. Came back in 2022, and I thought, honestly, Pop Moore's a run defender. So a well-rounded player. Didn't quite have the same pass rush production. Had a couple of great pass rush moves today. Honestly, he reminds me a little bit of a guy on the Patriots right now in Dietrich Wise. Just a fundamentally sound, well-rounded player. He's a big guy. He's going to be a tough physical matchup for anybody. He was working against Dalton Wagner, who we talked about a little bit yesterday, 6'9", 330.
Big dude.
And he was kind of throwing him around a little bit. So I liked what I saw from Baldonado today. He definitely stood out. It's kind of like we talked about before with Florida. They usually don't draft pick guys, but Baldonado he looks like a Patriot.
I think he's a base 3-4 end or a 5 technique, but I think he could reduce inside on passing downs if they wanted to use him in that.
I think he's going to put some weight and some muscle on too when he gets.
Well, what's
league.
Interesting is he's from Rome, Italy, right? He's not even from the United States, so he just started playing football, I think, at like 17 or 18 years old.
I'm not saying like exclusively draft guys like that.
Yeah.
But I like investing in those guys here and there because the ceiling's massive.
It's a perfect mid-round or day 3 guy.
Right.
Because the ceiling he's already at this baseline.
He's gotten this far playing the game 5 years.
I mean, he talked about it when we talked to him in media availability. I overheard him talking to somebody else about how in Rome, in Italy, he had to play with like elementary school kids. Yeah. Because they just didn't have enough numbers to get, everybody's playing soccer, right? So they just didn't have enough numbers to get 11 on 11. So he's playing at like 13, 14 years old. He's playing with like 8-year-old kids over in Italy just because they need the sheer numbers of it. And then he comes here and he actually is pretty good. Right.
So he played a year of high school ball here, as I'm guessing as an exchange student. And then he started getting, he said he didn't know that he was going to get offers. Like it kind of surprised him. He believes in himself. He was a little surprised that all of a sudden he's getting these offers. So guy like that always interests me.
Okay, a couple more defensive front 7 guys, which I really thought the front 7, especially on the East team, won the day for them. They played really well in team settings, 11 on 11 type drills. The other guy that stood out both days was Anthony Orji from Vandy. Both times I thought
around the field.
He was flying around, but most importantly, I thought he knew where he was supposed to be going, which is like hard to do in one day of practice and not a lot of exposures to what exactly they're running schematically. Another guy that I thought really stood out here today, and a Vandy guy, which they've kind of kicked around Vandy a little bit. They've never drafted anybody, I don't think, from Vandy, but Zach Cunningham was a Vandy guy,
Cunningham
right?
was a Vandy guy,
I'll always remember that picture of Bill down at Vandy's pro day working out Zach Cunningham, and everybody being like, oh, I wish that they had a pick in that range to take him, and they didn't have one that year. Maybe Orji's the guy that stands out to them.
Yeah, and he was, not only did he know where to be, he knew where other guys were supposed to be. And credit to the Falcons coaching staff, not that it hasn't been the way with the Patriots, but those linebackers are really loud and communicating, and so he's clearly okay taking lead role. He had an interception yesterday, made some nice plays in the run today.
Yeah.
He's an interesting player. By the way, they did draft a Vandy guy, Juwan Williams. It's Vandy. Adam Butler is Vandy.
Not sure. Well, UDFA, Adam Butler.
They still brought him in.
I don't know. Jawan Williams is I don't know if we want to bring that one
I'm
up.
just saying.
Let's forget about
They have dipped into
that
Vandy the last couple years. They have.
I knew that they had kicked around it. I don't know. I completely blanked on Jawan Williams for some reason. And the other couple guys in the trenches that stood out to us, and I want to talk about some more skill players, as I know everybody likes the skill players, including us. Connor Galvin from Baylor was the one tackle that I felt like held his own a little bit in this practice. And again, I wonder with offensive line play too, it's difficult from a blocking standpoint to really know who you're supposed to be blocking and play fast and all these types of stuff. And then from a defensive standpoint, like when you just get to tee off, like it's just teeing off. Like it just is what it is. So in this setting, I could see how it would favor the defensive lineman or the pass rushers a little bit more. But Galvin's the guy that I had mentioned to me from a few of my O-line friends, few of my O-line junkies. And he looked really good coming out of his stance, which I always looked for that with tackles. You want to see that explosiveness out of that stance, that initial kind of movement there. If you can get that, then I think your feet are good and your explosiveness is good coming out of your stance. You can work with the hands, you can work with the rest of it.
Yeah, and of course, it's like 5 helicopters fly by.
Like
6, make it 6.
Yeah.
Welcome to Vegas.
Yeah.
My take kind of on that, and Troy Brown talked about this a little bit after practice.
I think they're just rotating around us.
They're just circling. They're trying to watch the show. So many of these guys came out so jacked up to hit. They haven't played football in a month, maybe more. And that's always going to favor the defense.
Yeah.
When they want to come out and run through a wall, well, the offensive lineman just happens to be that wall.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Of course the helicopters come during the offensive line talk. Naturally.
Really? So we saw Jackson Kirkland again at guard.
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that maybe they put him at one practice. Give us one practice with him at tackle because I think he can hold up there.
Yeah.
But some of these offensive linemen, I don't want to name names because I don't like throwing people under the bus.
The defense
rough.
has won. The defensive front has won the last couple of days.
Yeah.
You can say that.
Absolutely. Okay. Couple of more skill players that stood out to us today. Let's go to tight end. Because we haven't discussed tight ends a whole lot. We talked about Coletto, who's one of those. He's a Hornig Award guy that we've been talking about a lot. That's that Swiss Army knife player.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's going to really necessarily be an inline wide type of guy at the next level. He's probably more of like a Kyle Juszczyk. But one inline guy that has stand out is Daniel Barker from Michigan State. And this is kind of like edge, I guess, in a way, right? Where you have to start thinking about maybe passing the torch at some point and filling out the depth chart with some younger players. Hunter Henry going into a contract year now at the Patriots. Believe it or not, it feels like yesterday that they signed all these free agents from the 2021 free agency class. But Hunter Henry's entering year 3 of a 3-year deal. Jonnu Smith is entering year 3 of a 4-year deal, but this year is the year that they can get out of it next offseason, right? So once you get to year 3, if he's still not producing at the levels that they're hoping for with that contract, there isn't out in his contract after this season. And they didn't really have a third tight end on the roster. They had Sokol on the practice squad. They had Scotty Washington on the practice squad. Those guys elevated and played a little bit. But once those injuries started to happen and Henry and Smith got banged up a little bit, they're kind of searching for tight ends. And I also would mention inline blocking at tight end. They could use like a prototypical inline hand in the dirt, almost like a 6 tackle type of tight end that can also catch it a little bit. I thought Barker stood out more today catching the football than blocking necessarily. We didn't get to see Schoonmaker, unfortunately, from Michigan.
Yeah, he's been out.
He's like the real blocker of this group that's here at the Shrine Bowl. But what'd you like about Barker?
I like that every time I watch him, I don't see anything wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know, he hasn't made a highlight play. He's not necessarily pulling away from guys in coverage, but he runs his route crisp, gets open, he catches the football if it's in a position where he can catch it. And there's something to be said for that. Just consistency, reliability, and he's going to be a day 3 guy because, again, he's not necessarily going to pop, but you're trying to build up some tight end depth, maybe find something. Like a guy like that certainly stands out to me. So did the kid from, and I'm blanking on his name here, the tight end from Wake Forest, I would say, fits a similar description.
Yeah, I think he looks like a type of guy, too, the Wake tight end, and if you can find his name, that I think he held up a little bit better inline blocking from what I saw.
Blake Whiteheart.
Yeah. Thank you. So,
he's a little bit bigger. Whitehart's bigger,
Yeah, so maybe if they're just looking to check a box of blocking, I think Barker gives you a little bit of burst and has a little bit of route running ability. The kid from Wake has a little bit more inline
The thing I like about them, I don't think either one of them are going to be a liability out there.
Yeah.
And that's like the biggest thing you can ask for, especially when you're taking guys on day 3. You're
Right.
hoping we'll play some role right away.
Yeah.
That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, Barker caught I couldn't tell if it was a cross or if it was just a corner, but they were trying to, 3-level flood the defense on that side of the formation, deep route, flat, fill it in with the intermediate. And he just ran across the field. And I thought he ran away from the guy, and he showed some nice burst and acceleration, and he seems like he runs well for a guy of his size. So he's somebody that certainly stood out. I thought he was actually open up the seam on Finley's third interception. If the ball was a little bit higher and put up here a little bit more, I think he would have had a chance at it. But the defender underneath actually was the one that tipped it up, and Finley ended up with it. So maybe I think that there's some seam and some crossing ability there, which is something that we obviously know the Patriots want to do and want to do a lot. All right, wide receivers. We mentioned Zay Flowers, obviously. There's a couple of guys here. One of the guy from Jackson State who we talked about yesterday, Daniels, and then
Dallas Daniels,
guy from Liberty, Demario Douglas. A lot of these. Demario Douglas. He had a great day today, especially in one-on-one individuals. He ran a slant that just absolutely undressed. I'm sorry, I didn't write down who the corner was off the top of my head, but he just absolutely undressed one of the corners on a slant route.
I'll tell you who it was. It was UAB Starling Thomas.
Okay.
Put him face down on the ground.
Yeah, so Thomas had a really good day yesterday, I thought, looking back at some of my notes. I think today they tested him a little bit. They put him on Zay, they put him on Douglas, and they said, let's see how fast you really are.
Right.
And Douglas can move. He's got some twitch to him. He's got some speed. And we talk about tiers a lot when we get into draft season. Zay's probably going to be a top 50 pick, if not a first-round pick. A guy like Douglas is somebody that, we're looking for that skill set, but we really don't want to draft it until like the 4th or 5th round, and this is somebody that might fit in there.
I think he's impressed a lot of people this week. He runs his routes hard.
Yeah.
Some guys get open and they know they're open. He's running, even he put a defender face down.
Yeah.
He's still running like the guy's right on his hip.
Yeah.
And that's something in a game like this you talked about earlier, guys who are really out here to compete, really prove. I mean, the motor's ridiculous and didn't have any drops, which has been a problem for some guys here at times.
Yeah.
He didn't have any drops. He's regularly getting open. He was a regular in the special teams rotation as well. They had him in the punt return with the punt return group. So another thing you look for in a game like this, who's just out there, right? Yeah, who just wants to get on the field in front of the scouts?
Yeah.
Hey, let me return punts. It's another chance to get out there and show their skill set. He is just constantly in that rotation, constantly at the front of the line. So it's been a good week for him so far.
Sure. He was also running some of those option routes on the inside for the Patriots.
They had him and Zay kind of switching off in that spot when they were in
I think tells you, back to the tiers thing, I think that tells you that they're kind of looking at, all right, Zay's probably tier 1 in that role, and this guy might be tier 2 or tier 3, but maybe somebody that's sticking around if the board doesn't fall away, that Zay, or even like a guy like Josh Downs from UNC, who isn't here, but is going to be another early day 2 type of pick. If those types of guys, they don't want to go that high at that role, maybe a guy like Douglas is somebody. But I would love to see them translate that role a little. We talk about quickness, and it's so important for that role. But I would also like to see a guy like Douglas, I think, is going to run pretty well in a straight line also, right? I think he's probably going to put up a 4.3 something. Having that role be a little bit of a speed vertical threat as well. I think over the years, you had the Edelmans, you had the Welkers, but somebody that's more like a Deion Branch or even a Troy Brown back in his prime that can stretch the field a little bit. I think that would add a little bit more, especially with the quarterback that you have with Mac. Those touch shot throws, the 20 to 30 yard, rainbow type of passes
from the slot.
From the slot, whether it's a deep over or it's a slot fade or slot corner or seam or something like that. Like those types of routes, I think, fit the quarterback. And you might not necessarily want Mac Jones to throw it 60 yards down the field like he's Josh Allen, but trying to pick it off at 25, 30 yards at a time.
Yeah.
And I think that these types of guys that we've seen, like Zay and like Douglas, are guys that could do that.
And Douglas ran some of those routes today.
Yeah.
Zay went vertical once. It was the last play of the game, and I think it was a ghost route. I think that ball was going where it was going the whole time. But we did see Douglas kind of stretch the field from the slot a little bit, so that's interesting.
So you mentioned the last play of the game, or last play of the day, I should say, out at West Practice.
Well, it was a game environment. They did that thing they do in training camp.
So they do it in training camp every year. If get lucky enough to go down to Foxborough, it's free to the public. I always say this all the time. Like, Go to training camp. It's like the coolest thing.
It's the best.
It's the best environment you're going to get. And that's a lot what this environment felt like was like training camp. I actually feel like it was even better because it was such an intimate setting that you felt right on top of things.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we're literally right on top. We're much closer.
Last play of team. They did it yesterday, too, I think, in one-on-one.
They did one-on-ones yesterday. Today it was team.
11-11 team. And you mentioned that take note of the guys that they put out there, right? And we haven't talked enough about Justin Shorter from Florida. I think we should talk about him a little bit now because they put Justin Shorter from Florida on one boundary. They put Zay on the other side, and that was the guy. That was who they rolled with.
And they had Douglas in the slot.
And they had Douglas in the slot. So I think those are the three guys that they feel like have shown them the most.
It's those three and Bobo. Those three and Bobo have pulled ahead, I think.
Right. So Shorter ran a double move, just a little stutter and go on the outside. Zay ran a stutter and go on the other side. The safety went to Zay. Surprise, surprise.
Right.
So the quarterback, do we remember who the quarterback was?
I want to say it was Chase Bryce, but I'm not positive.
Okay. He attacked a one-on-one matchup on the
No,
other
it was
side.
DTR. It was Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
It was a UCLA kid.
Yeah.
So they attacked a one-on-one to Shorter. He went right by the corner. The ball, not to throw the UCLA kid under the bus. Ball was a little bit underthrown, honestly.
Yeah.
He beat the corner badly. And last play, rolled into the end zone, walk-off touchdown.
Well, let's talk about the catch because he makes a great adjustment on the ball. Went down, like he had to go down to get it. And, you know, college players, they've played their whole lives. All right, you catch a ball on the ground, you're done.
Right.
He got right back up before he could be touched down, and he fell, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 yard line.
I think Douglas did that earlier in practice, too, actually.
Yeah, he did, and ran into the end zone.
Yeah.
So that was a great play from Shorter. Everybody was fired up. That was pretty cool to see.
Yeah.
And, Shorter's had, it was a good way to kind of emphasize, make sure he got in the show, right? Because he's been, like, quietly good all week.
Right.
But this was, until that was loud.
I found it interesting yesterday in practice that Bill O'Brien wasn't out at practice today, or at least we didn't see him.
We didn't see him.
We'll get to that in a second. But yesterday at practice, one of the first guys that went up to Bill O'Brien was Shorter.
Yeah.
And now Shorter went to Florida. So
another SEC guy.
So it wasn't Bama, though, right? Like, or anything like that. You wonder maybe on the recruiting trail or something like he clearly had a connection with Bill O'Brien.
Yeah.
And I don't want to look too deeply into that sort of thing, but it is noteworthy that he's played well out here. Bill O'Brien clearly has a background of some sort with him that they know each other.
He does now.
Right. And if he didn't, does now. He's a bigger receiver, though.
Big guy, big guy.
6'3", 6'4", but I've liked his
explosiveness. But he's also, so like we talked about this with A.T. Perry yesterday, right? Where he's tall, but he's not like built.
Right.
I thought Shorter was a tight end when we first got out here. I mean, he's a big, built, strong guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
As I do this, and people watching, like, make the motion because I'm showing what built looks like.
I'll give you another 30 seconds on your punter. All right, go ahead.
Michael Turk's a top 5 player here. He just he's been unbelievable.
Madden rating top 5.
Everybody stops when he kicks the ball. You can't not stop. You hear it.
Yeah.
Bill Belichick was right there in front of him.
Yeah.
During one of those periods today. I had him clocked at a 5-3 hang time.
I know.
He's putting the ball. I mentioned the one to Zay. He flipped the field. It was a 20-20 punt.
Yeah.
He's just been, or 20 to 30 punts. Sorry, he's been unreal. He's just getting his foot in the ball every time. They did some more directional punting today.
Yeah.
He was putting the ball right on the sideline. He looks like all the part of an NFL punter. We'll see whether that's in New England, but he's going to get drafted. He's going to play in the NFL. He has that ability.
Cam McCord spent some time with him today, too, on the side field. And I think one of the interesting things was the directional punting with him.
They were focusing on that big with him today.
Because when you come to these types of things, you expect him to just bomb it, right? And just work on bombing it. But today he was trying to hit, the sand wedge and the 7-iron. That's what Bill always says. It's like golf, right? It's a different club. And he was showing off all the clubs today, not just the driver. And you have to think that the coaches were saying, hey, we want to see you do this instead of just bomb it. He's got a leg. And when the ball, you can hear it, right? Like you can just hear the pop in the ball when he hits it. And that's certainly something that stands out. But I mentioned Accord. I spent a good amount of time on the side field with him today.
No, they're watching him.
Yeah.
This isn't just like, hey, he's here, he's our punter, he's the guy we got assigned. They're watching him.
All right. Well, that was our list. Javarius Owens from Houston.
I got to mention him earlier. Just another guy that's playing free safety. Looks really explosive. I did an interview up with him on 985sportshub.com. Told some funny stories about Marcus Jones the other day.
Oh, yeah. That is true. He's a Houston guy, and he played a little bit.
A lot of Houston guys here. A lot of the schools that are showing up, honestly, Houston has shown up.
Yeah.
Minnesota's shown up. In Florida, like those 3 schools, not that there's other guys, in UCLA, they got like 10 guys here, but those 3 schools, like, I feel like we're constantly talking about players from Houston, Minnesota, and Florida.
Before we wrap, I want to play the speculation game just a little bit.
Okay.
Where was Bill O'Brien? So
question.
maybe we didn't see him, but you know, we have eagle eyes out there. We
Yeah.
got binoculars, we got the whole 9 yards, and we looked all around practice trying to find him. And he wasn't in the middle of things, that's for sure, like he was
Right.
yesterday.
We could hear him yesterday. We didn't need to see him. We
Oh
could hear him.
yeah, you could
Yeah.
see, he was right there front and center. So the fact that he wasn't front and center tells me that he probably wasn't there. I like to speculate. We do that on this show from time
Sure.
to time. The Patriots have reportedly been interested or kicking the tires in offensive line coaches,
Yeah.
and Ryan Wendell supposedly, I think Albert Breer had the
It's
report,
Breer, yeah.
is coming out here to Vegas to do his interview.
Adrian Clem as well.
And I would also mention that Bill Belichick was a little late to practice. So maybe there's a possibility that those two guys are interviewing today. I'm blanking on the name. Mike Reese had him in his Sunday notes.
Two other guys, yeah.
The Baltimore assistant offensive line coach was Bill O'Brien's offensive line coach in Houston.
Yeah.
And to give your take, I'll look up the name really quickly. I think
And
there's
then-
a possibility that's where Bill
And
O'Brien
then Tony
was today.
Sperano Jr., the
Yes.
son of the former Dolphins coach,
Yes.
was the other one that Reese mentioned this morning, Sunday morning. So it's possible. It definitely makes a lot of sense, right? I think it's interesting that they're doing the interviews out here. They're
Yeah.
trying to get this guy in ASAP and build up that coaching staff. So that's what stood out to me. Like, they're flying, Wendell was in Buffalo.
Yeah.
I guess Clem's in Oregon, so it's not as much of a trip, but like they're keeping the search going. Even while they're here, they're not pausing the preparation for 2023 to come here and coach the Shrine Bowl. It's all happening right now.
Mike Devlin's the guy from Baltimore.
Mike Devlin,
that
okay.
was his offensive
I
line
knew it was
coach
the
in
last
Houston.
name of a Patriots player because I remembered that this morning.
It was a long time too that he was in. I
Yeah.
think the whole Bill O'Brien tenure with the Texans, Devlin was the
Okay.
offensive line coach. So he's definitely somebody that I would connect to the job. It's such a big job for the Patriots because they put a lot of game plan priority on the plate of the offensive line coach, and then they also put development obviously on the plate of the offensive line coach as well. And it's the biggest position group that you can
Yeah.
coach. There's going to be 10 guys. The Patriots are typically a team that keep 9-10 guys, and you have a couple guys
That's
in the
before the
practice
practice,
squad.
right? And
Yeah.
a guy, we think, or if not the first round, there's going to be a high draft pick at that position. And so you want to make sure as you develop, use a high draft pick on a guy, the development's paramount. Do you have a coach in that spot, a guy
Yeah.
you trust, a guy who knows what he's doing to make sure that development's taken care of and in good hands?
And it's no offense to Clem or Wendell, who I think are going to be good coaches. It would be good hires if they hired them. But I like the idea of maybe them going after Devlin again because he's got experience on the job in the NFL. Clem, I know, was with Pittsburgh briefly, and then he's done it at Oregon. But Wendell has only ever been an assistant offensive line coach. So I think what they would end up doing if they hired a guy like Wendell is that Billy Yates and him would probably split it.
Co, yeah,
right.
like last time.
Which is okay because they did that with
Cole and Carm.
Right. Yeah. Cole Popovich and Carmen Brasillo, so it's possible. One last piece of news, and then we're going to wrap. Vic Fangio,
Yeah.
going to the Miami Dolphins, the defensive coordinator. I hate to use the word worry because the Patriots right now are not playing in the playoffs and didn't make so they got their own issues
Sure.
to worry about if you catch my drift. But twice a year, they're going to have to play Fangio's system, which right now is the hot system in the NFL. It just is. The Seattle 3 was the hot system. Obviously, people hire out of the Belichick coaching tree to steal the Patriots defensive system. And now the Fangio scheme is everywhere. I mentioned it earlier in the show. A lot of split safety, a lot of match quarters. Like, that's sort of the base of the system. But I thought one of the things about the Dolphins that let the Patriots compete with Miami and then beat Miami the second time with their quarterback situation aside was that Josh Boyer is a man-to-man aggressive defensive coordinator. I don't think they're going to have quite that much aggression with Fangio. He is now the highest paid coordinator in football, according to Tom Pelissero, NFL Network. So they really went after him, and he's one of the best defensive minds in the game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, you go back to those teams he had in Denver, right? With the defensive front he had. Now they've added Bradley Chubb to Christian Wilkins and all those guys in the front seven. He's going to have Jalen Phillips.
Yeah.
He's going to have a lot of fun with those guys. And we'll see what it looks like on the back end. They have some talent there as well. But, I mean, is that team going to be top 10, top 5 in sacks next year? It feels like they should be, right?
Yeah.
So that's going back to, we'll tie the two together.
Yeah.
That game, you can already circle it right now. whenever the Patriots play the Dolphins, was 1, 5, 15, 18.
Yeah.
We're going to go into that game talking a lot about the Patriots offensive line and how they need to have a big performance. It's your answer to Vic Fangio. It's the offensive line coach, in part.
Yeah, Bill O'Brien versus Fangio is going to be a chess match.
That's going to be a good time.
I know that. And I think with Fangio, too, they have the corners to play, because match quarters or quarters in general, it is basically just man, you know, and there's a lot of kind of cover zero elements to it as well, because there's nobody behind you. You know, you have the deep fourth, and it kind of simplifies your vision of, all right, I'm only looking here, but there's nobody else there. So if you don't match up against your guy, then you're toast. So what he does a lot of is he puts a lot of stress on Xavier Howard, and hopefully for them, they hopefully get Byron Jones back and Nick Needham back, and they'll have those guys in the back end. But mainly, it's going to be the front that I think is going to be difference making for them, and allow them to not blitz a ton. I thought that was such a big detriment to, and why Boyer, I think, is out of a job right now, is because they just blitzed anyways, and they were banged up at corner, especially when they came and played the Patriots the second time. Like, they're playing like Keon Crossan, 7th round pick, special teams type of guy. They're not playing Xavier Howard and Byron Jones and Nick Needham. They got banged up corners, and they're still playing man blitz. And they needed a regime change there in Miami. All right, so tomorrow back out, second practice for the West team, but we'll be back out for East practice on Monday morning as well. We don't know if they're going to be in pads or not, so we'll figure that out once we get out there. But a really fun day today, full pads. This was like training camp all over again. It felt like it was August. It wasn't as hot, though, as it was here in August, which was nice. But we'll be back tomorrow with another show recapping day 3 of Shrine Bowl practices. For Alex Barth, I'm Evan Lazar. Thanks for watching, everybody.